This gospel of the raising of an only son of a widow is not only an interesting one, it's also a challenging one. It's challenging because its power is diminished if you look at it one way, and its message is diluted if you see it only with one eye or a lens. For example, if we look at this and we see, here's a story about Jesus. He comes across a funeral procession. Seeing it is the only son of this woman, this widow, he reaches out and then with a gesture calling forth back to life this young man. I could see in that then a real sign that says, God will raise the dead. And so for myself and for my family, I know this will happen. But then in the midst of my life and the experience of ones I love who die, I still grieve the loss of those. I still miss the ones who have died. And so in some way, having heard that, having looked at the gospel in that lens, well, I feel a little cheated. I can get even a little angry. I feel a little disappointed. Why didn't this happen to me? Why wasn't this my experience? But then I have to look again. Look at some of the details of this particular experience. And maybe in the details and in the experience, see something more. As we go through, there are a great deal of details that are written about in this gospel. We see it's the Lord. He comes upon, he sees the widow. It's even notice her. And it says he is moved with pity. Pity for this woman now will face life alone. There is no other one to plead her cause. In her society, no one to protect her, to watch over her, to guide her, and even physically to care for her. Moved with pity. And then when he touches the bier of the one who has died and raises him to life, he gives him, the son, back to the mother. In that wonderful gesture that were included, he is saying, now here, your life is restored for a purpose, for a time. Take care of her. Here, to the woman, now your life can begin anew. You have this one back in your life. And so in that gesture, in those little details that were given, is a little more of the meaning, isn't it? We're told there, by what Christ has done in this gesture, in this event, not just a miracle of raising someone to life. We're told about God's compassion, God's care, God's concern, noticing this widow who would have gone unnoticed by others in the village, the town, the city. She is noticed, and in noticing, his heart is moved with her. It is telling us our God is concerned about our daily life, concerned about what goes on in our living. Our God is not distant but near, near to those who suffer, in the midst of those who grieve, in the time of those who mourn. This is a great example of the compassion of God for God's people. But not only that, it is a strong reminder, an example of God's power over even death itself. Death cannot stop God's power. God will raise this one from death to life. God's power does not end at the grave. God's power over us continues. A life goes on. Those are powerful lessons. God's compassion and concern, God's power in this life and the life to come, meaning a life that goes on. That's really the issue, isn't it? God's gesture then, God's raising of this one is a gesture of hope, a sign of love, a hint of victory. That's what we need in our world, isn't it? Gestures of hope, signs of love, hints of victory. We live in a world that is still far too violent, where others are broken and many are hurt, where still others die and we are left alone. And we need those gestures of hope, those signs of love, those hints of victory beyond. You see, the Lord is not telling us there will not be death, for even these will die again. And then He, too, will face death upon a cross. It is not a story about there is no death, nor is it a story that says no widow will ever weep again, for there are still others. It is a story of the ultimate triumph. It is a promise of what lies beyond. It is the gift of saying there is victory. And in all of that, with compassion and care and victory, it says you will live differently then. And we do. We live in the midst of those things with hope. I live with the experience of that, with a sense of promise. I look beyond this to something more because it is true. So it's telling us about that belief and say, then embrace those gestures of hope and be reminded of those signs of love so that you live in the shadow, the hint of victory. But beyond that, it says, now be the same for others. Be those gestures, those signs, those hints for one another. You and I must, if we've been given them. And that is what reminded me of a letter I had read a number of years ago, actually. It's a letter about a woman who had recently lost her husband. And she writes this: there are no appropriate words, nothing you can possibly say that will make my life better, but your calls, but your visits, but your invitations have meant a lot to me. They remind me that inside I am still alive, even though outside I know this tragedy. Oh, I cry a lot, but I'm okay with that. I'm not embarrassed by it. I don't suggest that I will be anything more. So please don't come to me with your suggestions of taking medication. I'm entitled to the way I feel. I need to feel and I need to grieve for a time. And if I want to talk about my husband or say his name, it's okay. Then please don't avoid talking to me just simply because you're not sure of what to say or that you'll make me feel uncomfortable. If what you tell me is true, that you think of me all the time, then call me. Remind me. Even send me an email. Don't wait for that chance random encounter in the grocery aisle to tell me how much I've been on your mind that week. Remember, my loss isn't contagious. You won't catch it. You shouldn't be scared of it. And if you're planning an evening out or a lunch date or a gathering or a getaway, make the effort to include me. I don't want to feel all alone. My intention is not to bring you down, but just to have a little companionship, a little gathering with others. Even if I decline, it's always good to be included. Being excluded is the worst of all. And if you see my children, don't just simply ask them how I'm doing, ask them how they're doing, for they too have known that loss. I have come to realize in this past year, after the last meal was dropped off, after the last card arrived and the official visits were over, everybody else's life went on but mine. So don't just go through the motions of smiling and working and shopping and nodding. Tell the others how you feel and let them know that you're walking the journey with them. Let them know that you're willing to still be their friend. Simple gestures. That's what the Lord did. He told us that a simple gesture could be a gesture of hope, a sign of love, a hint of victory. That's all we're asked to be. Because we have been given that, I have the strength to be that. Because I can see beyond death, I can help others walk through the death. And because I have been comforted, because I have known God's compassion, I can be an equal gesture for others. So maybe this gospel is not what you might first think. Much deeper, much more challenging. It says, as your God has been for you a gesture of hope, a sign of love, and a hint of victory, then be the same, one for the other.